提醒各位贵宾，我们今天记者会全程呢都有中英同步口译哦，有需要的贵宾都欢迎您凭证件到外面的服务台借取口译设备。那同时呢，我们也有手语翻译以及听打的服务，都欢迎您多加的利用。Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to borrow the headsets outside for simultaneous interpretation. We also have sign language translation and also transcribing, captioning services available. Thank you very much.提醒各位贵宾，记者会大概再过3分钟之后呢，会正式开始哦。要请您就座，同时记得将手机转为震动或静音。非常谢谢您的配合。Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin in 3 minutes. Please take your seats and kindly turn your mobile phones into vibration or silence mode. Thank you. 主席、政委、委员。
Madam Chair, Mr. Luo, dear guests on site and online, welcome to the press conference that will present the conclusion and recommendations.
Or online, welcome to the press conference and presentation of concluding observations of the review meeting of the ROC Taiwan's fourth report under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This week, all the members of the International Review Committee have fully exchanged ideas with the representatives of Taiwan government agencies and legislature, National Human Rights Commission, and NGOs, and has a better understanding of how CEDAW has been implemented here in Taiwan, and later they are going to share with us their concluding thoughts. 那本周呢，国际审查委员已经分别和不同的政府机关、以及立法机关、非政府组织以及国家人权委员会的代表交流意见哦，对于 CEDAW 在台湾的落实情况呢，有进一步的认识以及了解。那等一下就会正式的针对第4次国家报告发表结论性意见。不过在那之前呢，我们是先用掌声谢谢我们辛苦的国际审查委员。Yes, let's firstly give all the members of the International Review Committee a big hand. Thank you so much for your hard work, for your time and efforts. 我们再次给他们一个掌声好吗？ Let's hear it one more time. Thank you so much. 那接下来呢，我们就要首先有请我们这一次政府机关代表团的团长罗秉成政务委员为我们开场。Let's firstly welcome 罗秉成 Head of Delegation of the ROC Taiwan Government Minister with a portfolio. 政委有请。
好，谢谢。
Thank you. Professor Xing, Chair of the IRC this time, and all the dear IRC members. Commissioner Ji from NHRC, and Commissioner Ye Liao from the Gender Equality Commission, Professor Huang, and dear guest, good morning to all of you. I am very grateful that the review of the 4th National Report on the implementation of CEDAW has been concluded successfully. The 5 RC members work 24 hours a day, almost, and have much exchange with government delegates and NGO representatives. There are about 400 or so government delegates who presented their thoughts, and NHRC members were also present while they listened to the opinions from the government and the civil sector. Gender equality is a never-ending journey. We need to work together, and only that is it possible that we make some developments. And Pierre, the premier from St. Lucia, our democratic friend came, and Premier Su had a meeting with them. And the premier from St. Lucia shared with us the African slogan that is, if you walk alone, you can walk fast. But if you walk with a group, you can walk farther together. So in a group, if one person runs really fast, but it doesn't help the group, all the members of the group need to encourage each other so that they can reach the goal together. Only people who have participated in this journey know that how many challenges there are and there will be. However, in order to make any progress, we need to share the burden, the load, and the responsibilities. In the span of 2 days, the 5 IRC members worked very closely and intensely. They had reviewed the national reports as well as the alternative reports from the civil society. Later on, they will present their conclusions and recommendations. I think they worked until 8 p.m. last night when they generated the draft. And we work it to provide translation as soon as we could. Some wording was still being revised this morning. And compared to before, I think we had an extra day for the discussions of conclusions and recommendations. And apparently, one extra day is not sufficient. But we do see that the respected IRC members had very intense discussions in producing their recommendations. And in the last review, there were 73 paragraphs in the conclusions and recommendations. And this year, we see there are 86 paragraphs, which is an increase. Later on, the IRC members will explain to us the main points of their recommendations. But I am grateful. I think we all are, because recommendations sometimes do not appeal to our ears, but they will bring progress to our country. So let's give another round of applause to the IRC members. Thank you for your advice and recommendations. I would like to conclude my remarks here, and I'll give the floor to Professor Shin.
Thank you very much, Minister Lo. Good morning. 大家好. We worked until 8 o'clock last evening, but we heard that the translation was finished only 5 o'clock this morning. And I believe that most of you did not have time to read this conclusions and recommendations from the International Review Committee. There's still some adjustment needed, editorial thing, but not in terms of content. And during the last 2 days of Wednesday and Thursday, I was like a slave driver, asking all the members of the committee to concentrate, because we had only, I think, 30 minutes break for lunch yesterday. So from early morning until late in the evening. And we hoped that for the next review, it would be nice if we have Friday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then if the press conference is held Monday morning, that would be nice, But of course, that has implications for cost, budget, etc. So I leave it up to you, Minister Lo, for the next review, if we stay on, this position. I would like to explain how the explanation would go. So I will give you the general thrust of our conclusions and recommendations, and then each of the members will speak about 2 to 3 minutes, emphasizing the issues that they were responsible. And then I hope that there will be some time left for the press. And I would like to know how many are from the press? How many of you are from the press? No? If there are any questions to be raised, then we would be happy to answer. Yeah. And first of all, I would like to thank for the invitation and all the assistance given to us for your hospitality from the government side, but also very active participation from NGOs, that we enjoyed very much. First of all, I would like to emphasize that this review held in Taipei is much better than what is actually happening in New York, in Geneva, for the treaty body review, because there is a much more participation, extensive participation from the government. And we were informed, because I was asking how many people participated from the government. And then it is in the general observation, which is we added, at the B section, section B. So introduction is just the process of how this review was prepared and then how it did. But general observation is the content of how we perceive this review. And the first thing is this review is much, much, much better than what is actually done within the UN system. And I was informed that 418 officials participated from all 5 UN, as well as other government agencies. And then 119 NGO representatives participated. And then the members of the National Human Rights Commission. There were 2 presentations by the commissioners, and then 2 presentations by the legislators. So this is indeed exemplary to the whole world, you know. So I would like to really express our thanks for this very extensive review. And I believe that that happens for other human rights treaties like ICCPR and ICSCR, as well as CRC and CRPD review, which all happened this year. Second point is we were informed that there were extensive reviews on laws and regulations, whether those are in compliance with the CEDAW Convention. So altogether, 36,205 laws and regulations were reviewed. And then 272 laws and regulations were found not in compliance of the CEDAW Convention or general recommendations of the committee, and 28 is still to be reviewed. And I think in the future, from now on, any law or regulation or even policy program should go through this checking whether this law or regulation is in compliance with the convention and the committee's general recommendation. The third point we would like to emphasize is there has been remarkable progress in terms of establishment of the National Human Rights Commission that you have discussed for last 20 years, you know, to establish finally 2 years ago, and then it's functioning. We think that it is very important to see the National Human Rights Commission as a watchdog. A watchdog bite when something is wrong, yeah? So it needs to criticize the government's action or law or whatever is wrong in terms of equality and discrimination and human rights violations. Watchdog is not a breach. You know, it's not, the Human Rights Commission is not a breach. It should play its function as a watchdog. Next point is the National Human Rights Action Plan, which we received a copy that deals with this year to up to 2024. And we didn't have time to discuss it because we were not given beforehand. And then a thorough analysis and revision of the National Action Plan, because it's up to 2024. So thorough analysis should be made, whether it fits the CEDAW Convention and gender equality. Fifth thing is COVID-19 pandemic. And Taiwan was praised, you know, as the best country in the world in the beginning, yeah. But we found out that there was no gender impact assessment, how COVID affected women's lives and gender equality. So in your recovery plans and policies and programs, you should incorporate gender perspective into any COVID-19 related recovery plan. And the sixth thing is, as pointed out by the National Human Rights Commission's independent opinion, there is lack of data on the disadvantaged and marginalized groups of women in Taiwan. So there should be more data collection as well as more policies and programs geared into their situation so that all this marginalized group of women, whether it's indigenous women or women with disability or middle and old age women or domestic workers, it should be oriented to improve their situation and bring gender equality. The last in general point is, although we didn't have much time, but climate change is really changing the whole world, and Taiwan should also come up with climate change mitigation and adaptation policy and plans which would fit gender perspective. So how it affects women's lives, so that needs to be done. And then finally, I would like to emphasize two issues that I am concerned, and then other members of the International Review Committee will address other issues. But the first thing is this comprehensive legislation on gender equality, as we recommended in our third review on CEDAW implementation, as well as the recommendations from the ICCPR and ICSCR. So we heard that government is planning to have comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, and then they will incorporate gender equality issues into that legislation. I don't know how long it will take, but it will take some time. And then we are afraid, the five of us are worried whether the issues of women's human rights and gender equality will be diluted, when you have a comprehensive, there is no specific emphasis. So we recommended all the points that we would like to see. So when you make a comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, there should be specific things that should be included in that. And until that time, all the laws reviewed, and then you should come up with concrete policies and legislations that would ensure women's human rights protection and gender equality. The last issue I want to point out is on the so-called comfort woman issue and history teaching. And I've been working on that issue from 1992, long time, 30 years now. And then you have Amma Museum, which was beautiful. And I visited there some time ago when it was established. And at the time, President Ma was even there for the opening of the museum. But they had to move. The museum had to move because the organization had financial difficulty. So we included that issue. So you need to provide education for the general public about the history and how women suffered, because that has big implications upon how women, victims and survivors of violence, face the stigma and all the isolation from the society. So I think how you perceive the past history of women's suffering and what kind of ordeal they went through, it's very important of how you perceive the survivors of various forms of violence. And then, of course, Professor Feride Aja will address that issue, the whole violence against women. So I'll stop here, but I really hope that your government either support this Amma Museum or create of the public museum for women's human rights, including this historical suffering. And I think I'll stop here and I'll ask members of the International Review Committee to talk about the issues one by one. And then next is Professor Nicholas Brun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Also on my behalf, I want to thank the government for a very well organized review process, for excellent hospitality here in Taipei. It has been hard work, but we have been able to do it with much support from many people helping us. I would like to address two issues which we are concerned about and reporting on. The first has to do with the legal status and implementation of CEDAW. And of course, we know that there is a very good starting point for this, because we have the Enforcement Act to implement CEDAW that has been in place now already since 2011, more than 10 years, and it has been a very important process to review legislation that it is in conformity with the CEDAW Convention. But of course, when we discuss the conformity with legislation, we lawyers think we have to make a distinction between law in books and law in practice. And it is not enough that we have the legislation in place. The legislation should also be is something that is present in courts and in lawmaking and in all kind of procedures, and the CEDAW Convention should of course also play a role when, for instance, judges interpret different pieces of law. And we see that, in fact, very seldom judges are referring to the CEDAW Convention in court procedures, and that is a matter of concern. It is of course good if you use the national legislation that is in place, but when you interpret the national legislation, in many instances you can also get help from the CEDAW conventions and from the general recommendations. But it seems that these tools are not very much used. So we think that you should consider establishing some kind of mechanism that could review legislative proposals in order to ensure that they fulfill the requirements under CEDAW. And this could be done as some kind of standing committee, where as a part of the legislative procedure, or it could be done in some other way. Another tool which could be used in order to make the CEDAW Convention part of law in practice is to establish an appropriate complaint procedure where individual complaints regarding rights under CEDAW could be handled. So these two mechanisms we think could help to make CEDAW living practice. The second issue I would like to address here is the question of balancing of family, childcare, and work. And here, of course, the starting point is this alarming numbers that we see, that the birth rate in Taiwan is very low. And we think that there is a national interest to make it more possible, or more to create a situation where having children is not regarded as a impossible burden for individual women. And of course here Minister Lowe said that we should share burden and load and responsibilities, and I think we men also should take part in this taking care of children, and we think that it is not enough to discuss 2 more days of parental leave for fathers. We think that we really should come up with solutions where fathers have a more fundamental responsibility, and where we can give longer parental leaves also to fathers, and create mechanisms for this in the legislation. Of course, also the maternity leave is something that should be reviewed, and altogether we think that this part of the legislation that deals with balancing family, childcare, and work, it should really be looked at in a more fundamental, holistic way, where also the issue of childcare services should be integrated, and we see that there are a lot of discussions. There are a lot of very small reforms proposed, and different views, but our impression is that the discussion in this field would need a new start, and perhaps a look at international examples and review of them could be a good start to see what has been done in other countries, because here perhaps Taiwan is lags a little bit behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nicholas Brun. Now I realize that this is televised, so and then rather than taking the questions from the media, maybe it's better to explain, what we have arrived as a conclusion. So I think I'll ask 5 minutes, from other remaining members of the IRC. So next person is Professor Feride Aja. And yes, please use the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I join my colleagues in thanking the government of Taiwan and the person of Minister Law for the very warm and very supportive environment that we were met in during our time in Taiwan. I just hope that our work here reciprocates the kind of goodwill that we have met in your hospitality and your welcoming attitude. Now, I will talk about basically the crux of the matter in terms of discrimination against women, because according to the CEDAW Convention, we know that it's the role of gender discriminatory cultural norms and stereotypical attitudes or stereotypical images of men and women are what lies underneath the whole process of actually discrimination and the problems, a lot of the problems that are faced with that are faced by women. This is because it's the basis of basic gender inequality. So a lot needs to be done on this respect, and Taiwan has been, as demonstrated in its in the previous reviews, has been doing a lot, but there still is a long way to go to change the discriminatory gender laws, to modify the stereotypes, and that takes a lot of effort, time, and resources, I must say, to conduct public campaigns, to have media activities, and all kinds of appeals to change this very basis of cultural norms that can be discriminatory in all societies. This is not something that is unique to Taiwan, of course. So now what I would like to say that in our report, in our review, we have analyzed this, and and we have mentioned this, and we have also underlined the fact that this kind of basic cultural stereotypical attitudes resulting in unequal division of labor in the home and in different kinds of its implications in women in public life are also the basis of domestic violence and violence against women. So in order to, there's a lot to be done in that respect too. The violence against women in intimate relations needs to be specialized and it needs to be particularly emphasized. And it's there are two issues here. One, most of the violence against in intimate relations and most of the what is called domestic violence goes on against women. In other words, domestic violence has a large segment of it in the under the category of violence against women. This needs to be recognized, and also there needs to be equal protection under the law for all victims of domestic violence. This not only women, but for all victims. And certainly, in the case of Taiwan, there seems to be some deficiency in terms of the protection of the family members of those in intimate relationships that do not cohabit. So that needs to be appealed to. Now, so as I said, we recommended that in accordance with General Recommendation 35 of the CEDAW committee, that the three famous P's should be the guiding light. In other words, that there should be prevention, protection of the victim, and prosecution and efficient prosecution and punishment of the perpetrator. And additionally, we have also recommended that all this needs to come under the heading of consistent policies which require significant resources, financial resources, as well as human resources. People need to be trained for this. Now, speaking of training, this brings us very much to the issue of, to the area of judicial training. I must say that there is a lot to be done in the area of familiarizing the judicial community, the judges, with domestic violence issues and with issues of violence against women. And we have recommendations to that effect in our report. Now, as far another issue that I'd like to briefly touch upon is an area where Taiwan has actually appears in glowing colors in many respects, that there are many, and that's women in politics. There are many legislators, a large proportion of legislators are women in this country, significantly higher than in many other countries in the world. And of course, the fact that the president is a woman is something to be very proud of. Nonetheless, this is the presence of women in politics is also rather uneven at different levels, I must say. For instance, in terms of individual candidates for mayoral positions in the municipalities, as well as the very top level of judiciary, which I understand is also political appointment of sorts, or in this country, women are not equally or nearly as well represented as in other areas, and there needs to be steps taken in that respect. I think that's probably what I will stop here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Professor Jia. Thank you for your explanation here. Yeah. Next, I'll ask Ms. Esther Egobamian Mushela to give some light on the issues that she was in charge of. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And of course, I would like to lend my voice to those of my colleagues to thank the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the Minister for all of the hospitality that you've extended to us and the goodwill, and of course the array of staff and support that we got to be able to undertake this assignment, which to me it's one of the models that are really global model. It's a global model that you would self audit or self-review is something that is highly commendable. But as we have listened to the chair and to my two colleagues who spoke ahead, a lot of work needs to be done. And how do you achieve that level of work and make all the necessary changes if you do not have a national machinery that is able, capable, positioned, and with the right kind of authority to be able to get others to make the necessary change that is required? The national machinery, in a layman's language, is like the engine that drives all of the gender work. And if you look at engines in vehicles, the better your engine, the better your vehicle. And so we really looked at the national machinery for women, the way it is currently structured, the kind of power and authority that it wields, the kinds of systems that it has in place as a public entity, and the capacity that it has to hold others accountable, because we're hearing of judges, we're hearing the legislature. Of course, it means dealing with political parties and helping to harness the human development potentials of half of the population of the country. And so in looking at that, we saw that some progress has been made. You have a full department of gender equality that is well positioned within the executive yuan. However, when you look at the results that have been achieved, they do not seem commensurate with the task that is set before the organization. And so your efforts at implementing the gender budget for women, or the gender budget system, is a very good initiative. However, we didn't see significant or substantive results from the sectors to show that that kind of initiative is taking root and likely to continue to yield results going forward. And some of the leading sectors had barely, and not up to 20% at the highest level, and well below 10% for the next. And so, which means that others are probably in the 1% range, and that is insignificant to achieve the changes that are required in the sectors to address the issues that we are hoping to realize. And so, how do we ensure that the authority, the oversight capacity, the mechanisms of the national machinery is adequate for it to do the coordinating work that it needs, and coordinating not just by calling meetings, coordinating to address the fundamental changes, to ensure that the standards are properly set for the other sectors, and they are not self-assessing or self-targeting, because that makes it easier to say, oh, I'm going to achieve only 1 kilometer walk today. But, you know, you might actually need 10 kilometers. And so it is a national machinery for women that should work with others to set the standards that will guide the progress in the different sectors. And to do that, you do need resources. You do need to have the human, the financial, and the technical resources. And so with regards to the national gender machinery, we made a few recommendations. One is that you strengthen the national machinery so that it can support the sectors in the other ministries, as well as the private sector and other stakeholders, to be able to undertake the kind of reforms, reviews, and changes that is required to realize gender equality, and that service delivery, both in the public and in the private sector, will actually respond to the needs of women. And then you will reduce expenditure on managing the challenges and the problems that arise from gender inequalities. We also looked at the need to institute a more effective coordination mechanism. This is good, the fact that we had a review and we had a number of line ministries or sectors present, including planning, environment. It's really commendable, but we need a functional, effective coordinating mechanism that has accountability built into it, so that people are not just coming because they are required to, but that they are held accountable for the things that they have said. We, of course, need clear indicators for that. How do you benchmark performance? And those are the things that we pointed at, some of the changes that is required to make the national machinery stronger and fit for purpose. The other area that I had the privilege and we as a group looked at is rural women and the chances and the opportunities that they have to be able to contribute to national development and take advantage of opportunities that are emerging globally, particularly in the digital economy. And so we looked at how to use rural industrialization schemes to promote the engagement of women, and to examine women-friendly and innovative models, looking at global best practice in terms of creating funds and bonds, you know, gender bonds that would drive the private sector or create incentives for the private sector to invest in women-friendly and gender-supportive initiatives that will boost the livelihoods of people in the rural community. We also looked at the fact that the agricultural gadgets that we have don't seem to be gender-friendly enough, and that the government might need to stimulate work in that direction. So we had a recommendation on that. And we also observed that some of the loans and finance facilities that are available, they have limits. There are caveats in them that make it difficult for women to access them for adequate period. And so we talked about expanding and reviewing the loan criteria so that you can have agricultural outputs of women expanded to contribute to national development. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll stop here now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Esther, Michela. Now, Professor Ruth Halperin-Kadari will give her emphasis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to join my colleagues in expressing gratefulness to the hospitality and all the support that we were given in this important task, and to commend the government of ROC Taiwan. This is really an exercise which should be viewed as best practices to other countries in expressing, I think what we really felt is that there is true accountability in this internal examination, and there is commitment on the part of the government to advance, to really fulfill these obligations that you have taken upon yourselves, and move forward. And we hope that we can assist you in doing this. So I will focus on the issue of family relations, but before getting there, I also want to stress two points along the way. One that was already mentioned by the chair about the NHRC, which is really a very and extremely important point of progress in your advancement of human rights. However, we were still a little concerned about the full securing of complete independence of this commission, especially in being able to independently receive complaints, process complaints, and offer redress in individual cases to those individuals whose rights may have been violated. And we believe that this is a crucial variable that must be taken care of, and hope to see this progress in the next report. Another issue that was not yet addressed is the mechanism that we in CEDAW we call special temporary measures, which Taiwan does practice. However, and I refer here to quotas, and this you usually refer to as the third ratio rule of third ratio of women in boards and directors, etc., in government enterprises or state-owned enterprises. But this is still not legislated, and we believe that you do have to incorporate it into mandatory legislated numeric quotas, ratio quotas, targeted hiring practices, etc. And this is a very important tool that should be more become more useful, forceful and utilized. Now, as to family relations, which is really guaranteeing equality in family relations, and primarily when family relations end, this is really a key issue in with respect to gender equality and women's position, economic position, and position in society. And there are still some problems there. Although it is really commendable that in your exercise, your internal review of all laws and regulations, you have taken care to look hard into CEDAW's general recommendations. And here I refer to General Recommendation 29 on the economic consequences of family relations and their dissolution. And you have proposed an amendment to your alimony law with respect to General Recommendation 29, but it's still far from what needs to be guaranteed in terms of securing women's economic independence and balancing the disparities and discrepancies between men and women who leave their relations, and the much higher toll that family relations, or rather motherhood, has taken on women's economic capability. Sometimes we refer to the motherhood penalty, and this actually might relate to what Mr. Brun has mentioned, the alarmingly low birth rates. If women know how the high cost that motherhood takes upon their economic capability and autonomy and independence, this probably affects this problematic situation that we see in Taiwan. And this is where your laws still have a lot to do to change. We understand that quite atypically, unusually, most divorces in Taiwan, more than 85%, are actually done by registration. with mutual agreement, without court intervention at all, and without court supervision or scrutiny or oversight, even when children are involved. And we also believe that this has to be looked more deeply into, studied, examine the outcomes of these divorces, and employ a mechanism to secure that the outcomes are really fair and equal, and women's rights are being safeguarded, and the best interest of the children are also being safeguarded. So there's still a lot that has to be done, but all your achievements are really commendable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before I forget, I thank my colleagues, very much for your hard work. I was the slave driver with whips, So I'm sorry, but thank you very much for all your cooperation and hard work. I have a few things to add. We still need to go through carefully whether there are some editorial changes to be made, which we will do by tomorrow noon. Initially, I said that everybody should be working tonight, and then I will wait by midnight. And then there was a protest from Mr. Brun that, gee, he expected to have some relaxed evening. So I extended the deadline to noon tomorrow. So I think the final version with the editorial changes, which in the UN, usually it is the UN staff who does that, but here we have to do it. So we will submit the final version by Monday morning. Yeah, and then I have to work with my assistant to go through after receiving all the minor editorial changes. And then we are sorry that we couldn't include all the issues that were raised. There are issues that are very important and that have big implications for all the other issues of gender equality. So we couldn't include everything, but maybe that should be wait until next review. So I'm sorry for that, but that's the limitation that we have. And then I would like to give some remarks on future reviews. We received a very lengthy government report, which is of course commendable. But nowadays within the UN, with all these many treaty bodies, and then you also have now 5 treaties that you have to report on and reviewed. So I suggest that, which is included in the final, as a final recommendation, please limit the government report up to 60 pages. And of course, you can put all the tables and statistics as an appendix. Yes, so that would be our request, so that it can be more focused and condensed. We would also like to ask the NGOs, please make coalitions and then provide us with a more, unified position. Of course, if there are conflicting positions, each side can present their own, but we hear repeated same issues, by many organizations in the same line. So please, next time, make a coalitions and then save the time so that we can more discuss in depth. And then the next issue, Taiwan should aim high, yeah? For example, maternity leave, ILO standard is 14 weeks for mothers, for maternity leave. You should not compare with Korea or United States or Japan, because we are all 3 are very bad in terms of gender pay gap. Gender pay gap, you should compare with Luxembourg, which has only 0.7%, highest among EU countries. So please aim high. So that you can achieve, and then can be truly exemplary country. And then another point I want to point out is we don't see many organizations that represent women in disadvantaged or marginalized position. Last review, I remember that there was organizations that represented indigenous women, for example, or new immigrants, the marriage immigrants. This time, there was only one person with disability still participating, but we would like to see more from these groups, and then maybe government can support their participation, providing them a special, assistance or even finance to bring them so that they can participate. I know that many domestic workers, who are carrying sick people at each household cannot be here, but there must be organizations who speak on behalf of them or their own representatives. So we would like to ask you that please pay special attention on these groups. And then finally, we were all so impressed by Minister Lo Ping-cheng for his thorough knowledge on the issues and the way how he conducted all the replies to our questions. It is truly impressive, and I hope that you will remain in this position forever. But we were also told that don't be deceived. Not all government officials are like Minister Lo. Yeah, so all the government officials in terms of gender equality and women's human rights should follow Minister Lo's example. And that's truly remarkable, as a man, and he knows the subject inside out. And we were very much impressed. And we would like to thank, finally, all the hospitality and support that you have given us. And then we struggled, without rest for 2 days, but it was truly a very, really remarkable experience for all of us. I'm coming to Taiwan many times, not only for CEDAW. This is my 4th engagement, as well as 3 engagements that I had on the issue of economic, social, and cultural rights. And I truly thank to all the government people, as well as NGOs, as well as the Human Rights Commission and members of the parliament. And thank you very much. 谢谢.
Another big round of applause to the IRC and Minister Luo. Next, can I invite the members of the IRC and Minister Luo? Would you please join us in the front? Next, the IRC would like to officially hand the report of the concluding observations and recommendations over to the ROC, Taiwan government. So can I invite all the members to join us in the front? Yes? Would you please join us in the front? 接下来呢，我们要有请国际审查委员会正式的将这一次第4次国家报告的结论性意见与建议报告书递交给台湾政府。那我们要有请罗秉成政委这一次的政府机关代表团的团长来代表接受。有请。All right. Yes, we have Professor Shin and also Professor Aja, Professor Broom, Madame Michelia, and Professor Halperin Kadari, handing over the report to Minister Luo. Yes, with their signatures on the report. 3, 2, 1. We will continue to push forward women's rights and also gender equality. Thank you once again for your hard work. We'll make sure improving your working conditions are a top priority. Next time you are here. Yes, okay. All right. 我们是再次的热烈掌声，谢谢我们的国际审查委员以及罗秉成委员，我们的政府机关代表团的团长。Would you please return to your seats? We have a few minutes left. We'll see if we have any questions from the media. 接下来呢，我们还剩下几分钟的时间呢，我们看看现场的这个媒体记者朋友们有没有要提问的。那最后的这个 Q&A 时间呢，我们要有请罗秉成政委帮我们主持。
好，我再次感谢5位审查委员，他们刚刚。
Once again, I would like to thank all 5 IRC members. Thank you for raising the 86 paragraphs of your conclusions and recommendations. They are clear and concise, and they are very meaningful to us. Professor Shen to us that there is room to make improvement. Yes, just like a teacher will always encourage the student to do better and better next time. I'm not sure at all whether 4 years ago I will still be here, but maybe I will remain on this post forever. It's hard to say. But for me, it's truly a wonderful journey of learning. At the third and fourth review meetings, I have personally observed that the IRC international members uphold such high international standards. As Professor Shin said, yes, we should aim high or higher so that we're always motivated to do more. We shall not stop. Instead, we need to do more. So thank you again, dear IRC members. This review model has been recognized by all of you. It could be a good model for the world, but as the paragraph 86 states, maybe we need to change the reports. If we provide too much information in the report, it's hard to read and digest. The government need to play a leading role in revising the way we write the report, not only for CEDAW, but for other conventions. It's not about winning or losing or producing the most information, but about providing the most concise and useful information that will make the review more effective. So paragraph 86 is really important. Speaking of time, maybe we can extend it, as mentioned by Professor Shin. Yes, we can think about that. This week, we have an extra day for the drafting of the recommendations, but this one extra day seems not enough. And also, when IRC members come to Taiwan, they spend most of the time in the meeting rooms and in the hotel rooms. And regrettably, they don't have too much time out on the street to see and meet the people of Taiwan. So hopefully next time they will be able to see the people and visit the organizations they want to visit. Maybe we can help make some arrangements so they can have a deeper understanding of the society in Taiwan. That would be a wonderful outcome, I think, in the future. The Gender Equality Commission and the Department of Human Rights as well need to evolve with each international review. We want to make continuous improvement. As you know, the 5 national reports have produced under the Implementation Act or Enforcement Act. And in fact, Taiwan has signed 6 core human rights conventions, not 5. ICERT is also one of the conventions ROC signed before we withdrew from UN. And now we're having the 4th review for CEDAW report, but ICERT, the first convention that was signed, hadn't been reviewed or hadn't produced even the first national report. However, I would like to inform you that with many people's efforts in the past 2 years, we are going to publish the first ICERT report. Based on other national reports, we're going to produce the first one for ICERT. So I would like to ask for your support. Let's thank the IRC once again. Okay, we are a bit over time, but I still want to ask if there are any questions from the media here. Please identify yourself first. Hello, I am a journalist from public TV station, PTS. I think many of the IRC members spoke that there could be some legislation to guarantee women participation in politics. And it was also mentioned that women of disabilities have encountered challenges in their daily life, so that there should be some policies to help them. On these two issues, Minister Luo, do you have some new ideas about possible planning at the government side? Well, among the 86 paragraphs, conclusions and recommendations, when they are finalized, government agencies will be assigned to corresponding agencies. They will analyze the content, and then they will decide how to respond to the conclusions and recommendations. So government agencies will need to make the responses, and the Department of Gender Equality will invite different agencies. We will gather meetings, and then we will assign the work. So the two questions you mentioned, women's participation in politics, does it require amendment of the law, or are there new policy strategies to protect the rights of women with disabilities? These two issues involve many agencies. We will therefore, as I said, organize meetings, collect opinions, assign work. And in the third review, I think Professor Shen mentioned there should be midterm review. So starting from now, in 2 years, we're going to follow up to see if we are able to carry out some of the changes proposed in these recommendations. So in one review after another, we continue to aim at more progress. I'm not able to give you specific answers today. By specific, I mean I don't have specific policies to tell you, but I am glad that based on the conclusions and recommendations, we will be able to have a really good reference in order to make improvement on those issues. Thank you. Any other questions over there? My question is about gender statistics. Last time or this time, I think NGO representatives and RC members all mentioned that we need more detailed gender-related statistics. From the experience of a journalist, when we try to get the data, the MOI or MOL will say that, this data is provided by the lower level of their organization. So whatever they get, they have. And I ask what their statistical methods are. Then the competent authorities and the lower level of the units may have different opinions. It's hard for us to get neutral data or more comprehensive data. So is it possible for the government to coordinate within itself to produce a larger scale of statistical data? Well, this shouldn't have happened because we refer to many international standards in compiling gender-related data because these issues had been mentioned by previous RC. So, but of course, in the current reports, maybe there is still some deficiency, but the structure and the methods are there. I think the issue you mentioned, maybe the issue from communication. I think you can approach the Department of Gender Equality if you want to require any kinds of gender stats. So every year we update our gender-based stats. There are all kinds of data over there, including a gender wage gap and so on. So if you need any data, please let us know. Please let the Department of Gender Equality know. And if you need more data, please tell us. We may change our database. Thank you.
Very important. And usually within any country, there is Office of Statistics that specializes And then it is a matter of concern what data you collect. For example, regarding gender equality, there should be a survey and data compiled regarding how much time a wife or husband spend on what, which shows, so there should be Office of Statistics established, and then there needs to be discussion about what kind of data needs to be collected. It's not up to the Department of Gender Equality, which is working very hard, but statistics specialists should be working on collecting data. And then regarding, for example, punishment, how many domestic violence cases are investigated, prosecuted, and convicted, that kind of data is very important from the gender equality perspective. So I hope that in the future, more relevant, important data and information would be collected. And regarding future implementation, I think I appreciate Minister Lo's initiative when I suggested last time that there should be a midterm review, which is now done within the UN system. Each treaty body pick the most urgent and important issues, up to three, and then within 24 months, 2 years, there is a report to be submitted on that. But here in Taiwan, you can make it better, So after 2 years, the whole yuans can be involved in analyzing how much improvement or implementation were achieved regarding all the, not only three, but all the recommendations in this thing, and that's really commendable. And I think in the midterm review, we pointed out that NGOs were not invited. So in the midterm review, it's like it should be like this conference. So all the NGOs and all the UN's government officials attend to really assess how much achievements, how much are implemented. So I would further suggest, and then I really appreciate, please stay in that position as long as possible until you retire. Don't go up to premier position. Yeah.
All right, in the interest of time, we can entertain one last question. I'm not a journalist. I am an NGO. I want to direct this to Minister Luo. In the future, when there are meetings, especially when you make decisions about women, we want more diverse women organizations to be asked, instead of only asking for certain women groups that the best. I think we need more diverse voices. I'm from the National Mother's Shield Children. I'm also a council member of Women Christians. So we care a lot about women in the farming areas too. Thank you. As Professor Xing said, women in disadvantaged groups are not represented enough. So yes, in the future, we need a platform that can collect more diverse opinions. Finally, I would like to thank the 5 IRC members again. Thank you all for your participation. And I want to thank the Women's Foundation and Departments of Gender Equality. Now that we got this test paper back, we know the scores. We have to think about how to do better next time. Thank you again.
大报告的审查会议以及我们结论性意见发表记者会呢，就到这边告一段落。我们再次谢谢罗政委以及我们的贵宾哦。Thank you once again. That's it for the press conference and the review meeting. Taiwan will aim higher and continue to help establish a gender equal and non-discrimination environment. Thank you again. 再次谢谢大家。那台湾呢也会持续的努力打造一个性别平等、性别友善的 非歧视的环境哦。再次谢谢大家的参与 ，Thank you once again for your participation. We'll see you next time. Bye bye. 再次谢谢大家，谢谢。